My name is Alexis Moore. I'm 48, a retired Army colonel. And I've been to enough ceremonies to know that the ones with your name on the front don't always mean you belong. The envelope came in late April, cream-colored with a gold seal, addressed to Alexis +1. Not Mom, not even Miss Moore, just a line that could have gone to anyone with the right zip code. I turned it over in my hands for a while, wondering if it was a mistake. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. My son, Evan, was graduating from college next month, and this was how I found out I was invited. It shouldn't have hurt the way it did. I faced worse than paper cuts and emotional slights. But there was something about being reduced to a generic +1 at your own child's milestone that caught in the throat like a stone. The last time I saw Evan, he barely met my eyes. His father's side of the family had always made it clear that I didn't fit their picture of motherhood. I wasn't soft enough, home enough, feminine enough. I wore boots, gave orders, and carried weight they couldn't see. I spent years brushing it off, telling myself it was just their ignorance, not a reflection of me. But standing at my kitchen counter with that envelope, I felt a chill of something deeper. Like somewhere along the way, I'd become invisible to the people who should have known me best. I'd missed birthdays before, deployments, duty stations, last-minute call-ups. I don't regret serving. I regret that my service made me a stranger in my own home. My ex-husband never said it outright, but the message was always clear. Real mothers don't carry rifles. I put the invitation down beside my coffee. The silence in the house pressed in around me. It's funny how something as simple as a name on an envelope can tell you exactly where you stand. Or where you don't. I stared out the window, where the dogwood tree had just started to bloom. For a moment, I thought about not going, about sparing myself another afternoon of polite smiles and passive remarks. But that thought passed. Because even if they didn't see me as his mother, I still was. And maybe, just maybe, that day would be different. Not for them. For me. The morning of the graduation was warm, almost too warm for a full-dress uniform, but I wore it anyway. Not out of pride, out of principle. My boots clicked softly against the stone walkway as I stepped onto campus. Cadets from the ROTC program gave me a nod. The kind you give someone who's done the work. I nodded back and kept walking. At the check-in table, the volunteer glanced at my uniform and blinked twice. "Security's at the south gate," she said without looking up. I smiled politely and handed over my invitation. "I'm a guest." She scanned the list, cheeks reddening slightly, then waved me through without another word. The courtyard was full of folding chairs and proud families. I spotted Evan near the stage, surrounded by his friends, laughing. He hadn't seen me yet. His father's family had arrived early and staked out seats in the center row. I found mine near the back, 2 rows behind a speaker tower, and just close enough to catch a few murmurs I wasn't meant to hear. "She came in uniform? Trying to make a statement?" someone whispered. A voice I recognized as my former sister-in-law replied, "Maybe she's just here for crowd control." They laughed, soft and sharp. I kept my gaze forward. An older man leaned over from the row ahead. "Which agency do you work for?" he asked, pointing to the insignia on my chest. I looked at him, steady. "United States Army. Retired." He blinked. "Oh. Thought maybe campus security. You know, with the uniform and all." I nodded once and said nothing more. Later, near the refreshment tables, a man in a gray suit struck up a conversation. He'd served 2 years back and recognized the patch on my sleeve. "You were in Syria, right? Medical evac?" I nodded. "That was you?" His tone shifted. Respectful. "Heard your team pulled off something close to impossible." I opened my mouth to respond, but another voice cut in. "She worked logistics," my mother-in-law said, sliding in with a tight smile. "Mostly behind-the-scenes things." The man's eyes flicked between us. He offered a polite nod and drifted off. I stood there for a moment, holding a cup of untouched punch, the sweetness clinging to my throat. Evan approached me just before the ceremony began. He looked handsome in his gown, a bit nervous, glancing over his shoulder as if hoping no one was watching. "Hey!" he said, barely meeting my eyes. I smiled gently. "You look good." He nodded. "Thanks. My friends are over there." I should. I nodded before he could finish. "Go on. I'll be here." He didn't introduce me to anyone, not even when we stood a few feet from each other while photos were being taken. One of his fraternity brothers asked who I was. Evan paused, then muttered, That's Alexis. No title, no role, just Alexis." I moved to the sidelines and watched him pose with his father and grandparents. They smiled widely for the camera, everyone glowing under the spring Sunday. No one asked me to join. I stayed still, the heat pressing into my collar, the polished edge of my nameplate catching the light. People say uniforms command respect. But sometimes, all they do is remind people of who you are. When they've already decided, they don't want to know. I didn't come to be honored. I came to show up. Still, as I stood there alone among the crowd, I felt every ounce of the space they'd carved me out of. And I held my ground. Syria was dust and urgency, a blur of heat and noise and decisions made in seconds. I was the officer in charge of an airlift operation near Aleppo, moving wounded civilians out of danger zones after a school had been shelled. We had less than 30 hours to evacuate over 100 people, many of them children. I remember the cries, the smell of burnt fabric, the faces smeared with ash and blood. We worked in shifts. No sleep, just bottled water and adrenaline. My crew didn't flinch. They followed my voice, even when mortar fire echoed closer than it should have. One of my medics, Torres, didn't make it. A mortar landed near the outer perimeter on our final night. We just loaded the last set of patients. He was 26. Quiet. He used to hum while he prepped bandages. I still hear that hum sometimes when everything else is silent. The citation said I showed exceptional leadership under duress and unwavering focus in life-saving conditions. They gave me the Legion of Merit back at base. They handed it to me with a handshake, and a press photographer was standing nearby. I never told Evan. It wasn't a secret, just something that didn't feel right to explain. What do you say to a 10-year-old when you come home, wearing something that cost lives? I put the medal in a small box, wrapped it in cloth, and tucked it into the back of my closet. I never opened it again. People like to say heroism is loud, that it comes with parades and salutes. But most of the time, it's just doing what needs to be done and living with what it costs. I didn't want Evan to see me in a uniform. I wanted him to know me as his mother. But somewhere along the way, that space between who I was and what I'd done grew too wide to cross. Maybe it started when I missed his first piano recital, or when I had to leave early from his birthday party to catch a flight to Ramstein. I told myself I'd make it up to him. I told myself he'd understand one day, that the quiet was better than boasting, that he'd feel the weight of what I carried without me having to say a word. But that afternoon, standing at his graduation while strangers laughed and called me security, I wondered if silence had ever really done me any favors. I didn't need applause. I didn't need a podium. But I think I needed him to know that behind every missed moment was a reason bigger than absence, a purpose worth the silence, and a mother who had always shown up, just not in the way he expected. The comment didn't come from a stranger. It came from Evan's aunt, loud enough to carry across the reception room, but quiet enough to sound like a joke. "Real moms don't wear combat boots," she said with a smirk, swirling her wine like it was clever. The people around her laughed, not loud, but with that casual cruelty people use when they think they're right. I didn't flinch. I looked at Evan instead. He heard it. I saw it in the way his shoulders stiffened. But he didn't say a word, just shifted his eyes to the ground and kept talking to the person next to him like nothing had happened. That was the part that stung the most. Not the joke, not the laughter, the silence from the one person I'd hoped would defend me. I stepped away without a word, walking down a hallway lined with framed photos of past graduates. My boots echoed against the tile. Too heavy, too loud, too military. Just like me. There was a window at the end of the hall, high and wide. I stood in front of it, arms crossed, watching the sun bleed through late spring clouds. The glass was cool against my fingertips, steady in a way I didn't feel. And just like that, I was back there, 18 years ago, lying in a military hospital bed in Landstuhl, sweat-soaked and exhausted, holding a red-faced, wrinkled boy who didn't cry much, just blinked up at me like he already knew things would be complicated. I had exactly 12 days with him before I shipped out. 12 days of midnight feedings, skin-to-skin contact, and trying to memorize his smell. I left a bottle of breast milk in the freezer and a letter for the nanny, explaining the sound machine settings and how he liked to be held during naps. I wore my uniform on the flight out. I cried once, quietly, into a paper napkin they handed me with my in-flight meal. The woman next to me asked if I was okay. I said I was tired. There were times I told myself I did it for him. That serving made the world safer. That helping others would somehow protect the life I left behind. But standing in that hallway now, the echo of that wine-soaked insult still hanging in the air, I felt the full weight of the question I'd never dared ask out loud. Did I choose wrong? Would Evan have turned out softer, kinder, more connected if I'd stayed? If I'd traded the rank for PTA meetings and carpool lines? Would he have called me Mom with pride instead of pausing like the word didn't fit? My hands rested on the window frame. The sky outside was too perfect, the kind of blue that didn't leave room for doubt. But inside, I felt hollow. I didn't regret serving. I didn't regret saving lives. But in that moment, I did regret how little of mine had been witnessed by the people who were supposed to know me best. All those medals, those citations, those commendations locked away in drawers. None of them meant a thing to the women laughing over wine behind me. None of them shielded me from the ache of not being seen as enough, not feminine enough, not maternal enough, not enough. And Evan, my Evan, the boy who clung to my dog tags as a toddler, who used to wait at the window when I came home in uniform. Somewhere along the way, had I let that little boy grow into a man who saw me the way they did? The thought made my chest tighten. I closed my eyes and breathed deep, trying to ground myself in the years I'd lived with purpose, with integrity, with love, even if it wasn't always present in the ways others expected. That window didn't show me the answers, but it held the reflection of a woman who had never backed down. Not from war, not from judgment, and not now, even if they never saw it, even if he never said it. I knew who I was, and I would keep standing in these boots. Because real mothers come in all forms. Some just carry more than their share. The music had just started again when the air shifted. A murmur passed through the crowd, slow and uncertain, like a ripple before a storm. Then I heard it. The unmistakable low rumble of an engine outside. Heads turned toward the double doors at the back of the hall. A staff member hurried to the MC, whispering something urgent. The MC paused, eyes wide, then leaned into the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, we have an unexpected guest. The doors opened, and light poured in from the afternoon Sunday. Standing, there was a tall man in a full dress uniform, medals glinting, posture exact, face calm but commanding. General David Ramirez. I hadn't seen him in over a decade. He stepped forward with quiet precision, boots clicking against the floor, eyes scanning the room. Conversations froze. The music stopped. Even the clinking of glasses halted mid-motion. He walked past rows of confused guests, past parents and professors, past Evan's father and his wine-hushed family. Then he stopped. His gaze locked on mine across the room. "Where's Colonel Alexis Moore?" His voice cut through the silence like a blade. My stomach tightened. Evan turned around, confused. The people at my table stared. Someone whispered, "Is he talking about her?" I rose slowly, the scrape of my chair loud in the sudden hush. Ramirez straightened, heels together. "Permission to approach, ma'am?" The room collectively inhaled. I nodded. unsure my voice would hold. He marched forward with the same calm certainty I remembered from Syria. When he reached me, he saluted. Sharp, clean, full, military honor. It's an honor to stand before you again, Colonel, he said. Your leadership saved more lives than any medal can capture, including mine. Gasps spread through the hall. A few cameras clicked. Evan stood frozen, eyes wide, mouth open. His father didn't move. His mother reached for the back of a chair. Ramirez looked out at the stunned faces. You all know graduates today. But I came to honor someone who once led under fire, who made the impossible happen, and who never once asked for credit. He turned back to me. Madam, I don't know what you've been through to stand here today, but I came to say thank you for what you did, for who you are. Madam, I don't know what you've been through to stand here today, but I came to say thank you. I held his gaze steady. It was never about me, General. It was about the mission. It always was. He smiled, a slow, genuine curve of pride. Then he turned to the room. This woman taught me what leadership looks like. You're lucky she's here. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was reverent. Someone near the front started to stand, then another, then the whole room followed. One by one, 300 people rose to their feet. No one clapped. No one spoke. They just stood, eyes on me. I didn't smile. I didn't cry. I stood tall, the way I'd been trained to. Shoulders square, chin lifted, heart steady. Evan's voice finally broke through the quiet. Small, uncertain. Wait. That's my mom? Ramirez looked at him. You didn't know? Evan stepped forward, his face pale. I didn't know you served with her. Ramirez's eyes softened. She didn't need me to say it. She earned it, with or without the room. The weight of those words settled into every corner of that hall. I looked around and saw it in their faces. Recognition, respect, and something else. Realization. I was still standing when Evan finally reached me. His gown hung crooked over one shoulder, his face pale, eyes brimming with something I hadn't seen in years. He didn't speak right away. He just looked at me, like he was trying to see everything he'd missed. Then, his voice cracked. Mom, I'm proud to be your son. My breath caught. Not from the words alone, but from the way he said them. Like they finally fit in his mouth. I didn't move for a moment. I just let the sound settle in my chest. Then I opened my arms, and he stepped into them, without hesitation. He held on tighter than I expected, like something in him had cracked open. I didn't know, he whispered. I nodded, my cheek resting against his temple. You weren't supposed to. I never needed you to. He pulled back, eyes searching mine. Why didn't you ever tell me? I smiled, soft and small. Because I didn't need medals, Evan. I just needed this. That moment was quiet. No speeches, no cameras, just a mother and a son, standing in the middle of a crowd that no longer mattered. Everything I'd carried, everything I'd given, felt worth it in that single breath of truth between us. For the first time, the title I wore wasn't pinned to my chest. It was spoken, and it was enough. A week later, 2 envelopes landed in my mailbox. One was from Evan's grandmother, written in delicate cursive on linen paper. The other was from a man I barely remembered from the reception, one of the ones who had laughed too easily. Both letters began the same way. I was wrong. Different words followed, some clumsy, some heartfelt, but all honest in a way I hadn't expected. His grandmother wrote about her assumptions, about the narrow box she'd kept me in. She said she didn't understand what strength looked like until she saw me standing still while the whole room rose. The other letter, simpler, just thanked me for my service and apologized for not recognizing it sooner. I didn't cry. I didn't read them twice. I tucked them both away in a drawer with other things that had once mattered too much. Because I hadn't needed their apology. Not really. but it still felt like something closing. A door I'd never expected to open. And now, didn't need to walk through. That night, I stood in my hallway, where an old photo hung crooked in its frame. My unit. Dust-streaked. Sunburned. Grinning like the war hadn't worn us down yet. I traced the edge of the frame with one finger. The silence in the house wasn't heavy anymore. It felt earned. I looked at those familiar faces and whispered, "They finally saw me." But I'd always seen myself. And for the first time, that was enough.